Welcome back to Racing Rundown here on YouTube. Today we're going to be previewing the 147th Preakness. A very interesting race with the way that it's come up, all the horses that were originally going to run in the Preakness and then aren't here and all that fun stuff. So, but we're gonna bring you the usual formula. We're gonna go through every single horse, talk about the positives and negatives that we have for them, and give you our take on them. And this is going to be a little bit less in-depth as the Kentucky Derby because we don't have as many horses to get into, and there are a few horses that I frankly have nothing to say about, at least me personally. I don't know if it's different for Eric, but we'll start it off by getting into the number one horse, Simplification. Eric's pick in the Kentucky Derby, and since you picked him in the Kentucky Derby, I'll let you lead off with Simplification, Eric.
Yeah, as many people know, I'm a very big fan of this horse, and he has every chance to run a big race here in the Preakness. He's ultra consistent, one of the most consistent in the crop. When he wins, it's very impressive. When he loses, it's impressive. He just really doesn't run many bad races, and he's consistent from a figure standpoint. He's the most adaptable horse, not only in this Preakness field, but in the crop. And his Derby run was excellent. You know, maybe a little further back than most thought, but it ended up being to his benefit. He was able to pick his trip and make this big move. He just wasn't able to match the top three at the end of the day. And I think that might be the biggest knock on him is it seemed like he had every chance to pass Epicenter and Zandon, maybe not beat Rich Strike, but at least run second. And he wasn't able to put that together. So I'm still failing to find a reason why he wasn't able to mow those two horses that finished second and third, mow them down late. So that's a cause for concern. But once again, he'll be able to sit a good trip and maybe even being a bit closer here. He won't have to be 15th out of 20 in the early stages. He can probably sit, fifth, fourth or fifth in the early stages just off the leaders, and that'll be probably much more kind to him than having to pass 14 other horses and lose some ground on the turn. So tons of positives and negatives with Simplification, but he does need to take a step forward, I think, to be a win contender here in the Preakness.
The upside is certainly there with him. I echo everything that Eric had to say about him. I mean, you look at what he's done throughout his career, as long as he's not up there engaging early on, which he was too close in the Florida Derby. That's certainly been established by his follow-up effort in the Kentucky Derby. And not that they're going to go Kentucky Derby level fast in this Preakness. You know, there's two horses that I think are really, you can say, are going to be somewhat forwardly placed. And so I guess if early voting's walking and for some reason Armagnac doesn't go to the lead, then Simplification maybe could go up there. But Eric's certainly right. Being a little bit closer could certainly work to his benefit. But the question is number one, why didn't he run better in the Kentucky Derby? Because it looked like he certainly could have. Epicenter had to be feeling at least some effects of that pace. He definitely wasn't feeling it to the degree that a Messier or a Crown Pride were, but he was close to it at some point, and all the other horses that were around him dropped out of the Derby, and Epicenter was the one that hung around. So that's certainly the question that you have to ask for Simplification. And, you know, he's always been a really good horse, but I'm hesitant to say that he's shown flashes, but I hesitate to say that he's ever jumped out as this is a great horse. And I say that as someone who said he was going to win Grade 1. So I have a ton of respect for him. I like his talent, but I am with Eric. I'm having a difficult time trying to find a way that he is able to top the Kentucky Derby effort. Now we're going to move on to the number 2 horse, Creative Minister, in this race. One of the horses, the one horse in here for Ken McPeak. He's coming out of a really good allowance effort on Kentucky Derby Day. He won that race pretty impressively. He got a big number from it, too. That was not something that I care about because I don't really care about figures, but he got a good number from it. Going back to his first 2 career starts, the first one was going 7 furlongs, which, looking at this horse, he wants to go a little bit more than 7 furlongs there. He ran a winning effort on debut. There just wasn't enough ground. He was coming from second to last at Gulfstream, I should say. So that wasn't really going to benefit him ever that much. He was a little bit closer in his effort at Keeneland, and he kind of was in the middle of where he was in his efforts or his 2 prior efforts, I should say, in his most recent effort. Not quite forwardly placed up there, but not as far back as he was on debut. So I think he's got a chance to sit that good mid-pack trip in the Preakness. I really like this horse. And the other thing that I have to say for him is he's not a horse that has been losing to all the rest of the horses in this crop that aren't that good. And it's been made clear for the last few weeks. We don't think that this group of horses, and even before the Derby, we didn't really think that this group of horses was that good anyway, and I think it's been established by the Kentucky Derby. But Creative Minister hasn't lost to that. Again, he has a valid excuse for why he lost on debut and 2 really credible efforts. So I think he's got a ton of upside in there. The big reason why I like him, though, and maybe this is a little bit cynical of me, but the big reason why I like him is because he is a fresh face in a crop that definitely needs a fresh face, and he hasn't lost to the level of horses that everybody else has lost to in this. Because even Epicenter has an ugly loss, and Creative Minister has a loss, yes, but it's a valid excuse, and he hasn't lost to the 3-year-olds in this Kentucky Derby in a stakes race yet. So I think he's got a really good shot to win this Preakness.
He's a contender for sure, and I think he'll obviously be a nice enough price to where you'll feel comfortable, because the heavier favorites, kind of the big 3, if you will, in this race, will suck enough out to keep him in the low double digits at least. And he's just taking all the steps forward. His maiden win was really nice. He closed up well. And last time out, it seemed like he wanted further and further, despite getting to the wire well clear of the rest. And obviously he gets an extra furlong to go here. And I think the race likely sets up in a way that benefits him. So there's tons to like about Creative Minister for sure. Obviously, the big thing is he has to answer the class question. It's not like he's beaten proper Grade 1 company or faced anybody like that, whereas the horses exiting the Derby, a Secret Oath, even in early voting, have faced much tougher in their career. There's a lot to be said about a horse jumping from a non-2 all the way to a Triple Crown race. That's not something that is often a successful route, but he could be the horse to break that mold or defy that trend because of what he's put together in his last 2 races.
Now we're going to move on to the number 3 horse, Fenwick. I don't have too much to say about him. Really, the only thing that he could end up being is a pace factor, but I'm not sure that I'm super confident that he's going to be the one setting the pace. That's where his one win came was when he did trip out at Tampa and won on the lead, and outside of that, there really isn't any upside for him. He doesn't have any stakes classes. One stakes effort was in the Bluegrass, which was really bad, and outside of potentially being Fordley placed, which, again, I'm not really too sure how much to read into how close he'll be in this race, he really offers nothing. So he is the long 50-1 on the morning line that he is for a reason. Just got dropped in last minute. He's just kind of the typical filler horse that you get in the Preakness.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure he'll be up there contending for the lead in the early stages. He had a terrible trip in the Bluegrass. I mean, you can draw a line through that race because he was trying to be sent to the lead. He got kind of collapsed on from some horses to his outside, and they took the rail away from him. He was in tight going into the first turn, and then he found himself mid-pack rather than in front where he wanted to be. And even throughout the race, the rider, Paco Lopez, I believe, was just – I remember watching this race back and, like, he's being asked every step of the way. So it's an easy skip over for me. That being said, he doesn't really have much else going for him. Obviously, his one run for down in Tampa for trainer David Fisher went really well. He went wire to wire. He put up an 88 buyer, which for a horse to do in a maiden win against probably subpar horses. I mean, Command Performance was in there, but all things considered subpar horses, that figure is really good. And if you're going off that as his last effort instead of the Bluegrass where nothing went his way, then he's a player. I think he'll be on top in the early going, or at least dueling with an early voting or an Armagnac or one of those two at least. And that's all the only factor he'll play, but there's, he's not good enough to win this race. Obviously, there's much better horses in here, but he's going to be a factor, and there is one reason to give him some love in the sense that, he did not get a good trip at all last time out.
And now we're going to move on and talk about easily the feel-good story of this Preakness, the filly Secret Oath. She's going to try to become the 7th filly to win this race. She's coming out of the Kentucky Oaks victory that she had, and she would be the first horse to win the Preakness, or the first filly to win the Preakness in its traditional format since Rachel, obviously, Swiss Skydiver, fake COVID Preakness, all that stuff. But Secret Oath is coming out of a really good effort in the Preakness. In the Kentucky Oaks, mixing words up there. She's had a really good trip in the Kentucky Derby, Kentucky Oaks. Really good ride from Luis Saez. And again, I was someone who defended, and I still believe rightfully so, defended Luis Contreras. But she won that race because of the ride that Luis Saez put on her. And I think that she's going to get a good trip in this race, very similar to the trip that Creative Minister is going to want to sit. I think it's just going to be a matter of, is she good enough to beat the boys? And I think you look at that effort that she had in the Arkansas Derby, she was the best horse in that in retrospect. And I've been saying this for over a month now. Why did she lose that race? Because John Court boxed her in down the backside, and she had to take up slightly, go wide around everybody, and that plus Cyberknife tripping out ever so much there, that is what cost Sigurdo the Arkansas Derby. But I do think she was the best horse in the Arkansas Derby, especially now ever since she came back to win the Oaks. She beat Nest, who's really good, and then Desert Dawn ran a very credible effort, and Echo Zulu is Echo Zulu. So she's got, for the first time in her career, she's actually beaten horses, actually beaten real horses. She's got real back class for the first time. It's really, for me, just a matter of, is she good enough to win the Preakness? I'm also not crazy about the price she's going to be. She's 9-2 on the morning line. I think she'll come down from that because she's always taken money in her career. Whatever she was in the Arkansas Derby was not anywhere close to what she went off at. She was I think she was odds on in both of her stakes wins in Arkansas. So feel good story. Certainly I would love to see her win, for not only to see another filly win the Preakness, but to see Wayne Lucas get a record tying 7th Preakness victory, so there's definitely reasons to want to see her win, but I'm going to give her the opportunity to win this race, and once again, not pick her in this race.
Another one with a big chance. I don't think anybody, if someone tells you they think, that they know she can beat the boys, they're lying to you. And anybody that says she has no chance to beat the boys is also lying to you. Nobody knows, because she ran incredibly in the Arkansas Derby 2 starts back, and she probably wins it with a cleaner trip. That being said, with a cleaner trip in a victory, is it really by a lot? Because, I mean, it's not like, even if you move her up 5 lengths, she only beat Cyberknife by a length, and Cyberknife really isn't all that. So that's kind of what you have to balance, was even then, is the talent there? I have no idea, and I don't think anybody does. But the Oaks was good, and she should get an excellent trip here. If she sits a similar trip to the one she sat in the Oaks, I think she's going to have every chance in the world. She's going to be given the opportunity to win this race. It's going to be hard to find trouble, in my opinion. And if she gets a clear run of it, then it surely comes down to ability. And that's what you have to see. Can she be better than a Epicenter and early voting, even a Simplification? That's remains to be seen. On figure, she's not up to standard with those 3. But who says she can't take this step forward to be there?
And now we're going to move on to the number 5 horse, Early Voting, passed up the Kentucky Derby to come to this race. Early Voting is likely going to be the early speed in this race, and he'll likely have company from 2 other horses. We already talked about Fenwick. We'll get to the second horse that will be up with him, but Early Voting it has a good chance to win this race, but I wouldn't put it any more than good. His first 2 career starts were really good efforts. His Withers victory, screw the figure on that. We all got fooled. It was actually a good race, and I had plenty of good things to say about him in the race that he ran against Mo Donegal. He won that race, or he was second in that race by a neck in there, and I said afterwards that he had earned his spot into the Kentucky Derby if that was the route that they had chose to take with him. He did not run in the Kentucky Derby, obviously. He passed that up for this race. However, I don't know that I love Early Voting in this race for 2 reasons. Number one, there are going to be horses that are going to be up with him. Now, this is not saying that they're going to barbecue it like they did in the Kentucky Derby. I don't think that that's going to happen. I really don't think anybody else could see that happen. However, what I do think the 2 horses that are probably going to be up there with Early Voting could do is soften him up just a touch. And what happened in the Wood Memorial? Mo Donegal beat him on the spot. Mo Donegal he didn't have a terrible trip, but he didn't have a great trip either. And he was still able to beat Early Voting by a neck. I'm not going to say it was a convincing neck or anything like that, but he beat him there on the spot. And why did Early Voting lose the Wood Memorial? Because he was the second best horse on the day. That's really the only reason that I think you can look at to say Early Voting lost the Wood Memorial. And I apologize if I said the Preakness there. I should mean the Wood Memorial with that. But Early Voting lost the Wood Memorial because of that. He's a horse that you can run by. And that's the reason why I don't like him in here, because I think they're going to soften him up just a touch. Like I said, not Derby level fast, but just a touch, just enough for the horses coming from the mid-pack area to run by him. And as he's shown, he's a horse that you can run by. So I like him. I think he's got talent. He could trip out and win this race, absolutely. But I just don't see that it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat for sure. If you asked me 5 days ago, I probably would have picked him because he looked like lone speed, and then you threw in Fenwick and Armagnac, and it's a whole different game now. We do know there's opportunity for him to maybe get away with a lone early lead, though, because Armagnac has not always been the quickest to the punch early on. He was in a small field last time, lacked a ton of pace. He was kind of sent. The fractions played well into his favor, and but you know, you go to his two efforts between his maiden win and the allowance win last time out, and he wasn't quick enough, plain and simple, to go with a horse with quicker horses. And early voting does just have a lot of natural early speed. He's a very quick gate horse. And then we know Fenwick, kind of the same boat. He's only been on the lead one race, and that was his win. And while he wanted the lead in the Bluegrass, other factors prevented him from it. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities for him to luck out and find himself on the lead and then create his own fractions. And then we're talking about something completely different. But I'll touch on that in a little bit when we talk about our favorite Epicenter, and why I still think for early voting, it just seems like he's second or third best no matter how you draw this race up. Unless he's able to absolutely crawl in the early going, he's going to have to just overcome a lot of things, in my opinion, in terms of his competition. But he's bred for this. He's been well prepped to get to this point. Chad Brown training him up to this. I'm not the first person to say it. It's not like this is a revelation or anything, but it was the smartest move ever to pass on the Derby and run here and know that you have a chance. But of course, if things don't go his way on the front end, like on paper it shouldn't, then it's going to be very tough for him to win. But he could hit the board. I wouldn't be shocked at all. I actually be expecting him to do that more than anything.
And now we're going to move on to the number 6 horse, Happy Jack, in here. Another filler horse, not really too much to say for him. Before the Kentucky Derby, was beaten 1,000 lengths in both the Santa Anita Derby and the San Felipe. Just kind of ate up Derby points, ate money in the Derby because of the name value for him, and that's what tends to happen in the Kentucky Derby. There's no real upside for him. I'm going to reach for a long shot in the Preakness when we get to a little bit later. You can probably figure out who that horse is just based on what the horses that we have left are, but Happy Jack could very well do the same thing that the horse that I'm reaching for could, but I don't like any of Happy Jack's races, and not that I like the other horses' races that much more than Happy Jack's, but there's some minor more upside with that respective horse than with Happy Jack. 14th in the Derby, he didn't really, that was a Derby where if you were a closer and you were good enough, you were definitely going to pick up horses. I think more so than anything else, just running at California against truly awful horses really showed with him in the Derby.
Totally. I mean, the only horses that he beat were tired horses. He did not actually pass anybody of substance. He was not making up any ground late, and it's not going to be any different here. I mean, I think it's interesting. He's 30-1 morning line, and Fenwick's 50-1 morning line, because at least Fenwick has reasons he's lost races, whereas Happy Jack just doesn't ever put it together. Does put blinkers back on. I think that could help him a little bit. Doug O'Neill in interviews said he'd like to see him a little bit more involved in the race in the early stages, because he doesn't think he has the turn of foot to make up 20 lengths like they've been trying, and I definitely agree with that. We'll see, though. I don't think the blinkers would move him up into a position where he could even hit the board or something along those lines. But once again, it's just there was no case for him to be made in the Kentucky Derby, and I don't think there's a case for him to be made here either.
And now we're going to move on to the number 7 horse, Armagnac, for the 1,000 owners and trainer Tim Yaktine. This horse got dropped into the Preakness on Sunday, so completely, like Eric mentioned, it looked like early voting was going to potentially be lone speed. Not the case anymore with Armagnac in here. Eric was kind of hinting at it a little bit with the early voting aspect of this Preakness, and I think that, you look at Armagnac, he's done his, I don't want to say his best running, but I mean, I guess for lack of a better term, he's done his best running on the lead, or at least in California on the lead. Now, does that mean that he's automatically going to be able to contend with early voting here? We'll see what ends up happening there. But you look at his runs, that's where he's forwardly placed in it. In the races where he wasn't in front, specifically his stakes efforts, he was in a race with Forbidden Kingdom, and Forbidden Kingdom has infinitely more speed than Armagnac does, and that was just the thing that conduced with him not being able to get there. Aside from that, he's not good. He's a pace factor. That's about it. He faded, and they went fast in the San Felipe and in the Santa Anita Derby. He wasn't really involved in the Santa Anita Derby, so I really shouldn't include that race. But in the San Felipe, he faded. They went fast, but he will still fade in this Preakness here, even if they don't go super fast, because there are just better horses than him. And it hasn't been said enough. The non-Messier Bob Baffert horses or Tim Yakteen horses or whoever the trainer is, the non-Baffert horses that had campaigned on the Kentucky Derby Trail, and I'm not including Tava in this, everybody else aside from Messier in that barn has just not been good. Doppelganger, Newgrange, Armagnac, Wharton, all those horses, they're just all not good. And it hasn't been said enough, and it needs to be recognized that these are just not good horses. It's been a down year for this ownership group, and that's just another point that I just had to make.
For Armagnac, I mean, let me just put it this way. We just dogged Happy Jack for a couple minutes, and Armagnac is probably the only horse that will ever be able to say they were beat by Happy Jack on multiple occasions at the graded stakes level. So that's kind of all you need to know. I know that his best game is being on the lead, but it's also just when you don't face anybody, it's pretty easy to beat them. His maiden group was pretty bad, and of course, the allowance just a couple of weeks ago, we also have to mention that this was 13 days ago is what he'll be coming off of. But he beat a horse coming off a maiden win for Bob Baffert, for Bob Baffert, now Sean McCarthy, but point being, nothing great there. And then the horses behind him just cut below, every single one of them. Nobody's ever ran a good enough race to be graded stakes caliber. So, listen, he's been exposed twice at the graded stakes level. It's no different here.
And now we're going to move on to the prohibitive favorite right now for this race, and probably the prohibitive favorite when it comes to post-time, Epicenter. Right now, the best 3-year-old in the crop. It's time for me to admit that I dogged him very heavily going into the Kentucky Derby, and I'm not going to dog him very heavily going into this Preakness because he ran a really good race in the Kentucky Derby. That's all you have to say. I mean, if Sonny Leone had zigged instead of zagged, we'd be talking about a horse that would be like everybody would be punching the ticket to Belmont for the Triple Crown already, because there's not much of a case that can be made for Epicenter to lose this race. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to pick against him, but it's very difficult to find how Epicenter loses this race other than he is just coming off of a career effort in the Derby where they went super fast, and that's what I'm banking to play against him is career effort in the Derby. The pace was toxic, and maybe that took just a bit out of him, but that's a risky angle to play with here, and I understand that. I'm throwing caution to the wind and doing that, but outside of that, there's a very difficult case to be made for Epicenter to not win this race. He truly showed a new element in the Kentucky Derby. He sat off of that pace, which obviously he had to do, but Joel Rosario rode a great race in the Kentucky Derby, and he just got beat on the spot by, it was just an example if he got beat by a horse that was 1,000-to-1 chance that everything went right for Rich Strike, and Epicenter just got beat on the spot there. Now, normally that would be something where it would be a negative for Epicenter, and it's a negative to a certain extent, but Epicenter's still a good horse. You look at his efforts beforehand. The Louisiana Derby was a really, really good effort. The Risen Star, he pounded 2 of the better 3-year-olds in the crop, Zandon and Smile Happy, and Zandon was a horse that he also handled very well in the Derby. It looked, Zandon had every opportunity to run by him, and Epicenter just held him, and I think that certainly, at least to some level, speaks to Epicenter's ability to be able to hold Zandon and go on and run a really credible race. I'm going to stop short of saying a winning effort, but really, really credible race in the Kentucky Derby. So again, I picked against him in this race. I'm acknowledging that, but it is very difficult to find a reason for Epicenter to lose this Preakness other than he's just going to, and I don't want to say bounce because I don't think he's going to bounce, but if he's just a touch off coming off of that career effort in the Derby.
He's a standout in here. There's no other way to put it. When you won 4 of your last 6 and your 2 losses have been by a head and 3/4 of a length, one of them coming in the Kentucky Derby, that's all you really need to know. In the Derby, I mean, We'll go back to 2005. We did it in our Derby preview. We'll do it here again in the Preakness. Fleet Alex. I mean, he was coming off of a huge prep win, heading into the Kentucky Derby with a lot of expectations. And it felt wide open. He obviously didn't go off favorite because of the presence of Bellamy Road, but nevertheless took a lot of money. Was pretty much the fan favorite going in, and sat a very similar trip to the one that Epicenter sat in the Derby. Made the big move and then just got nabbed late by the deep closer. So that's, and obviously, second, third, whatever. Point being, they ran very similar races. And then all Fleet Alex came back to do was win the Preakness and the Belmont. And I'm not saying that Epicenter is going to win them as stylishly as Fleet Alex did, but it's just that same progression that he's shown where he was probably on talent the best horse in the Derby. He just was a victim of circumstances, and the Preakness is going to work out a lot better for him. And I think I mentioned the versatility of Simplification. Epicenter is right up there with him because he can go to the lead. Now, that's not what they're going to do here, obviously, but he can stalk as well, as close as he did in the Louisiana Derby, or if for some reason everybody sends, he can sit 6-7 lengths off the lead like he did in the Kentucky Derby. I think that's an excellent tool and weapon that he has. And I think I mentioned the scenario where, hey, maybe Armagnac doesn't break. Maybe Fenwick doesn't break. Maybe they both don't break. Well, Joel Rosario is probably the best rider in the country when it comes to playing the game out of the gate. If he realizes there's too much speed, he'll pull him back. He won't let him go. Or if he realizes there's no speed, he'll sense. So if he senses that early voting's kind of getting away with things, he'll just set up Epicenter on his hip and be right there, and then just pounce when it's necessary and go on with it and win for fun. So I think the adaptability, you don't have to worry about him working out the trip because he'll be able to work it out for himself. So there's just a lot to like. He's a clear standout in this field, and he's just certainly hard to find ways in which other horses can beat him.
And now we're going to move on to the final horse in this Preakness, number 9, Skippylongstocking. I have my tradition with the Kentucky Derby. I reach for long shots. I don't have that tradition established in the Preakness with horses underneath, but I'm going to do it here with Skippylongstocking. I think he's got a shot to be the horse that hits the board in the Preakness, because the Preakness does this too. And I just, before doing this, I kind of had that momentary realization to myself that, hey, this happens in the Preakness too. So he's going to be a price in here, no doubt. And I think he's got a chance to hit the board. And you look at his efforts beforehand. Okay, so he's coming out of the Wood Memorial. Mo Donegal and early voting, the two horses who finished in front of him. Sure, they were distant from him, but they're good horses. Start before that, credible effort in an allowance race at Gulfstream on March 2nd of this year. Race before that, he was in a salty allowance race, which included a horse who's come back to win and a couple other decent horses. And then he was in the Mucho Macho Man, which he was beaten in the Mucho Macho Man, but he was beaten by Simplification, who is pretty good. So I recognize that it's a reach, but I don't have a problem reaching for long shot horses in the Triple Crown because that's what it usually amounts to being. So I'm gonna say he's gonna finish third in the Preakness. And I don't know that that's going to be the most lucrative thing in the world because I don't know what the show pools are going to be or anything like that, but he's going to be my long shot horse for the Preakness to finish third in here. I don't think he can win, but I think he can finish third because you go through the Preakness. This tends to happen more often than you would think.
And I get what you're saying. I'm definitely a bit more cynical on him. I mean, maybe he could come hit the board if a couple horses don't show up, but if there's a clear top 4 in here, and then maybe the 5th in Creative Minister, and you need at least 2 of those horses to not show up, 3 of those horses to not show up, for him to have a chance. I thought his Wood Memorial run was great, but I also question he was well beaten by the clear top 2 in the race going in. It was if Mo Donegal in early voting didn't run 1-2 in that race, everybody would have been shocked. Even though Morello was favored, but then you go beyond what Skippylongstocking finished in front of, and it wasn't that good. And his allowance went 2 back purely, much like Rich Strike in the Kentucky Derby. Skippylongstocking tripped out into a brutally quick pace, and he was fortunate enough to be making a run from 10 lengths off the lead. And then before that, obviously, he'd been absolutely blanked in stakes races that were nowhere near the level of the Preakness. So I'm not very high on this horse. Once again, if a couple don't show up and they do go quick enough to where it maybe sets up for an off-the-pace type, it could be this horse, but I just think that there's better alternatives even if we're coming from off the pace, like a Creative Minister. So we'll see. Obviously, Rich Strike happens, so anything can happen, but this one I don't feel as good on.
Well, there's a little problem with Creative Minister being that, and because Creative Minister is going to be my pick in this race, I'm doing the fool's errand and trying to pick against Epicenter in here. I laid out the reason why. The only thing that I think you can pick against Epicenter with is playing did the Derby take enough out of him where he's not going to be as sharp in the Preakness. And there are some people who are bringing up a history note that there's only been one horse that's finished second in the Kentucky Derby that's won the Preakness in the last 30-something years. That's not why I'm picking against Epicenter here. It's purely just because I think that there's a small chance that he could not come back from the Kentucky Derby with the same bullet that he did in that Kentucky Derby. So I think you've got a shot to beat him here. And I was looking at this Preakness. I liked Simplification a lot last week. I thought that I could end up on him. Early voting, you obviously had to look at because of the potential pace scenario with this race, but I thought really the only horse that you could make the case to beat Epicenter with is Creative Minister because he's the fresh face. He's coming out of 2 winning efforts and a third, his career debut, which I would contend was also a winning effort. He just was just going too short there. I really think Creative Minister is the only horse you can take against Epicenter within the Kentucky Derby, unless you're someone who's absolutely convinced that Secret Oath can beat the boys, but I'm not convinced that she can beat the boys, so that leaves me with Creative Minister. It's a risk. I understand that Epicenter is going to be close to odds on, if not odds on for a reason, but I think the angle's there to an extent with Creative Minister, and hey, maybe if he hits the board, that still ends up being a somewhat positive result. So he's going to be my top pick. Epicenter is going to be second in here just because you can't not have Epicenter if you're making a trifecta here. And then, as I mentioned, Skippylongstocking is the reach long shot horse. I will agree with Eric. I'm less confident in it than I am. I'm less confident in this pick than I have been in some of my other reach picks, but that's why I'm prefacing this by saying it's a reach. I acknowledge that it's a reach, but I think it could potentially happen.
And for me, I'm going to go Epicenter. I just I have a very hard time believing he loses this race. I mean, anything can happen, especially on the Triple Crown Trail, but this seems as close to a sure thing as we've seen on the Triple Crown Trail in recent years. He's just a standout, plain and simple. I said it once, I'll say it again. He's a standout. He's got the talent. He's got the adaptability to be here. And you know, Steve Asmussen can do this. You know, I never worry about one of his horses being fit and ready for this race. I mean, it's hard to have a great record in the Preakness, obviously, given the kind of horses that a guy like Steve Asmussen brings. But when you look at the horses he brings back off of 2 weeks, most of the time they run well. And I think obviously people might think, oh, well, he ran his race in the Preakness, he's not ready for this. Listen, horses can run back off of hard races all the time. And then any trainer that says that they can't, they're lying to you. Just because horses can run a lot more than people think. I mean, that's why, you know, Steve Asmussen knows this. He's a proper horseman, and that's why horses like Carlin and Rachel Alexandra were able to win off of a 2-week break, and horses like Midnight Bourbon and Looking at Lee were able to run respectable races off of 2 weeks as well. So I'm not worried about it, and I think he runs a great race. I think the biggest alternative in terms of a threat to win and beat Epicenter is the filly Secret Oath. She does have to prove it, but I think that's kind of what she's been doing her entire career, is proving people wrong. Wouldn't be surprised to do it again. And then I think Creative Minister would be kind of the double-digit price horse I think could come late, hit the board. But I do think Simplification also runs a big race. The one horse I think will be a low price that I am willing to let beat me is Early Voting. I just think that the race doesn't set up well for him. I know earlier I said he could hit the board. And, yeah, maybe if those circumstances do fall into his lap where it's a bit easier than it looks on paper. But all things considered, I'm going to go with my intuition and say of – you know, the grouping of Epicenter, the clear standout, the couple below being Secret Oath and Simplification, and Early Voting. I think Early Voting falls to kind of the bottom of that group of 4.
And with that being mentioned, that's it for our Preakness preview. Be sure to check out this week's episode of Racing Rundown, where we're going to do the most of the Pimlico card. I'm not going to say the entire card, but we are going to do a good chunk of the races on Black Eyed Susan's Friday and Preakness Saturday. So be sure to check that out. Their link will be below in the description. And also, I will have a link to our Kentucky Derby recap and also the replay analysis that Eric did on the Kentucky Derby, looking at the trip for just about every other horse in the Kentucky Derby. And with that being mentioned, that's it for this video. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.